I watched her wedding ring catch the light before I ever saw her face, a sharp little flash that hit me harder than the sirens outside the chapel. In that instant, standing alone on the sidewalk with my hands buried in my coat pockets, I understood something most people never do. Sometimes the deepest love does not end with holding on. Sometimes it ends with stepping back so quietly that no one ever knows you were there. Before we continue, drop your city and time in the comments. And thanks for listening to my story. Now back to the story. I am going to tell you how I loved her. Not the way songs brag about. Not the way movies sell. I loved her the way you love someone you're willing to lose. Her name was Claire Morgan, and for a long time she was my best friend before she ever became my heartbreak. I met Claire during my junior year at the University of Colorado in Boulder, on a Tuesday that smelled like wet pavement and burnt coffee. I was late to a night class cutting through the student union when I heard laughter crack through the dull hum of the building. It was hers. Bright, unguarded, and loud enough to turn heads. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor with a group of friends, textbooks spread everywhere, wearing a gray hoodie 2 sizes too big. She looked safe then, like someone who still trusted the world. We did not talk that night. We talked a week later when we got paired for a group project neither of us wanted. She stuck out her hand and said my name like we were already friends, like it was obvious. That was Claire. Back then she was dating Evan, a guy she talked about the way people talk about weather. Something that just existed. She never sounded excited when she said his name. She sounded careful. I did not think much of it. I was 21, focused on finishing school, working late shifts at a diner off Pearl Street, and pretending I knew what I was doing with my life. Claire was just someone who laughed at my jokes and stole fries off my plate. When we studied together. Everything changed the night she showed up at my apartment after midnight. It was early winter, the kind where the cold seeps through your shoes and makes everything feel heavier than it is. She stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, eyes red, mascara streaked down her cheeks like something had cracked right through her. She did not say a word when I opened the door. She just walked in and sat on the floor against the couch like her legs had given up. I sat down across from her and waited. I had learned early in life that silence can be a kind of kindness. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded thin, like it might break if it went any louder. She said Evan was gone, not moved out, not taking a break, gone. He had packed his things while she was at work and left a note on the counter that said he needed space and did not know who he was anymore. No explanation, no goodbye. I watched something change in her that night. It was not just heartbreak. It was the collapse of trust. From that night on, Claire leaned on me. Not in a dramatic way. In quiet, everyday ways that slowly rewired my life around hers. She called when the nightmares hit. She showed up when the silence in her apartment got too loud. She sat in my car outside her building when she could not make herself go inside. I listened. I always listen. She told me how Evan used to pull away whenever things got serious. How he shut down when she needed reassurance. How she spent months shrinking herself so he would not leave. I never interrupted. I never badmouthed him. I knew better. People in pain defend the wounds that made them. Weeks turned into months. Winter thawed into spring. Claire started smiling again, slowly, like someone testing ice before stepping fully onto it. We made routines. Saturday morning pancakes at the diner where I worked. Late night drives up Flagstaff Road with the windows cracked and the radio low. Movie nights where she always fell asleep halfway through and never apologized. I learned the sound of her breathing when she was calm. I learned the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. I learned every version of her laugh. Somewhere in all of that, without a single dramatic moment, I fell in love with her. I did not announce it to myself. There was no lightning strike. It just settled in quietly, like a truth that had been waiting. And I never told her. Because love, real love, does not always demand to be spoken. Sometimes it chooses patience instead. Claire began to heal. I could see it in the way she stood straighter, in the way she talked about the future without flinching, in the way she stopped apologizing for needing things. I was proud of her, and terrified, because healing means movement, and movement means change. The first time Evan's name came up again, it was almost casual. We were sitting on the hood of my car watching the city lights when she mentioned she had seen him at the grocery store. She said it like she was reporting the weather, but her hands were shaking. She said he looked different, older, quieter, like someone who had learned something the hard way. I said nothing. I let the silence hold us. Over the next few weeks, Evan kept appearing at the edges of her life. A text here, an apology there, long messages about therapy and growth and regret. Claire read them out loud to me, her voice unsure, like she was asking permission without saying it. I nodded. I told her she deserved honesty. I told her people can change. Each word tasted like blood in my mouth. The night she told me Evan wanted to meet, she was pacing my living room, twisting her fingers together. She said she did not know what she wanted. She said she was scared of reopening old wounds. She said she trusted me. I told her I would walk her to the cafe and wait outside. I told her I had her back no matter what. That was the moment I knew I would lose her. Not because Evan was back, but because she was finally strong enough to choose. I sat on a bench across the street while she went inside. I watched through the window as Evan stood when he saw her. I watched his face soften in a way I had never seen before. They talked for a long time. Too long. When Claire came out, her eyes were wet, but her shoulders were relaxed. She said he had apologized without excuses. She said he took responsibility. She said he was not asking for anything. She said she needed time. I drove her home that night. We did not play music. The silence felt final. Days passed, then weeks. Claire spent less time at my place. She smiled at her phone more. She started wearing the blue dress Evan used to love. I never asked her where things were going. I did not need to. The truth was unfolding right in front of me. The last night before everything changed, she came over unannounced. She sat across from me on the couch, knees pulled up, eyes steady. She said Evan had asked if she believed they could try again. She said he had changed. She said she felt safe with him in a way she never did before. She said she was scared to lose me. I smiled. I told her she never could. I told her I was proud of her. I told her she deserved the kind of love that stayed. She leaned forward and hugged me, tight and familiar. I held her like I always did, like someone who was not breaking inside. When she left, I sat alone in the dark and finally let myself feel it. The full weight of loving someone enough to let them go. Months later, the invitation arrived in the mail. Simple. White. Her name and Evan's printed side by side. I stood on that sidewalk outside the chapel on the day she married him, watching the ring flash in the light. I did not go inside. I did not need to, because the story did not end there. Not for me. I did not go home after the ceremony. I drove until the mountains disappeared behind me, and the road flattened into something easier to breathe on. There are moments in life when staying still hurts more than moving, and that day, motion was the only thing keeping me upright. I ended up at a truck stop diner just off Highway 36, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it has been fighting the same war for decades. I slid into a booth, ordered eggs I barely touched, and watched strangers live their ordinary lives. It felt grounding. It felt unfair. I did not cry there. I did not cry at all that day. Grief has its own schedule, and mine was patient. The weeks after Claire's wedding moved slowly, like time itself was being careful with me. People assume losing someone you love happens in a moment. A goodbye. A slammed door. A last look. But my loss was quieter than that. It happened in empty hours. In habits I had to relearn. In muscle memory that kept reaching for someone who was no longer mine to reach for. I stopped making pancakes on Saturdays. I took the long way home from work to avoid passing her building. I boxed up the hoodie she used to steal and shoved it onto the top shelf of my closet. I told myself this was what love was supposed to look like. Letting go without bitterness. Wishing happiness without conditions. Some days I believed it. Claire texted me once, about a month after the wedding. Just a simple message. She said she hoped I was doing okay. She said she missed our talks. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. I told her I was good. I told her I was busy. I told her I was proud of her. All of that was true. None of it was complete. Life has a way of continuing even when you feel like it shouldn't. I finished my degree. I picked up more shifts at the diner. I learned how to sit alone without feeling like I was being punished. One night, long after closing, I sat with Marty, the cook who had been flipping eggs there since before I was born. He poured me a coffee and looked at me the way men do when they know something hurts but don't want to pry. He said some loves are meant to teach, not stay. He said it did not make them smaller. He said it made them honest. I carried that with me. Spring came again. Then summer. The city warmed, people laughed louder. I started breathing easier. Healing does not mean forgetting. It means remembering without bleeding. I ran into Claire by accident at a farmer's market near Pearl Street. She looked happy. Not loud happy. Settled happy. Evan stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back like he was afraid to take up too much space. He looked at me with recognition and something close to gratitude. Claire hugged me. It was different now. Shorter. Careful. She told me she was glad to see me. I told her the same. We talked about safe things. Work. Weather. Nothing that could crack open the past. When they walked away, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Because for the first time I knew I had done the right thing. Not the easy thing. Not the romantic thing. The right thing. Years passed. Life filled in the spaces Claire had once occupied. I moved apartments. I changed jobs. I learned new versions of myself. I loved again. Not recklessly, and not immediately. But honestly. Her name was Rachel, and she had a way of listening that felt like she was giving you time instead of taking it. She did not replace Claire. No one replaces a first deep love. She simply became her own truth in my life. One night, lying beside Rachel, I told her about Claire. Not the longing, not the pain, just the story. Rachel listened without jealousy. She squeezed my hand and told me it was beautiful. She told me it said more about me than about anyone else. That was the moment I knew I was ready for something lasting. Years later, Claire sent me a photo. Her and Evan standing in front of a small house with a porch swing. She said they were expecting their first child. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I smiled. And I meant it. Because love does not always need a reward to be real. Sometimes it is enough to know you helped someone find their way back to happiness. I never told Claire I loved her. Not because I was afraid. But because love does not always need a confession. Some love is meant to be carried quietly. Like a steady hand on someone's back when they are learning to stand again. I stood aside so she could step forward. And in doing so, I found my own path. If you are listening to this and you have ever loved someone enough to lose them, I want you to hear this clearly. That kind of love does not make you weak. It makes you rare. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces where no one is watching, that kind of love always finds its way home.